Hi everyone, thank you for joining today's webinar on the changes to both the immunisations and ACC in your practice. It's a really busy time for everyone, so thank you very much for joining. If for some reason you can't stay for the whole session, we will put a recording of today's webinar up on our Insight Customer portal early next week, so please feel free to access that after if you want to. Okay, so before we get started, I'll cover what our agenda is for today. We'll go through a few pointers on how to use GoToWebinar, and then we'll start the presentation. We'll allow time for a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. I'll show you where to do that shortly. If you have any questions about the audio or visual connection on GoToWebinar, we'll try to answer those immediately. However, if you can't, if you're having difficulty sometimes just leaving the webinar and rejoining, we'll fix that. So you should be able to see the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you click the orange arrow, that will collapse the control panel away from the screen. The orange microphone tells you that you're muted, and all audience members will be muted for this session. The next icon will either maximize or minimize the screen that you're viewing the webinar in, and we recommend to keep it maximized. If you have a question, you can type it here where it says enter a question for staff, and we will answer your question at the end of the session. If for some reason we don't answer your question in this session, we will contact you directly to go through your question. Okay, so we're very grateful to have Rachel, Annette and Harriet from ACC joining us on our webinar today. Rachel and Annette are both from the Digital Operations e-business team and have been involved in the planning and implementation of the Medtech API upgrade. Harriet is working in the provider vendor registration team, looking after the database for ACC providers and vendors, as well as the registration authority managing the database for digital certificates on behalf of the Ministry of Health. I'm Holly Hodson and I'm the Clinical Product Specialist here at Medtech. I'll lead the main component of the presentation, and at the end, Prashant Koval, our Product Specialist, and Chrissy Patterson, our Product Manager, will take our Q&A session. So to start with, I'll talk a little bit about the changes to immunisations. The Ministry of Health has specified immunisation changes for this year, and these requirements have been split into two phases. So the first phase of these changes will be made available to practices by the 1st of July, and the second phase will be made available to practices by the 1st of October. In today's webinar, we'll be giving you an overview of the changes that will be made available on the 1st of July, which include the PCV10 3-month vaccine closure, the new adult Tdap 45-year and 65-year vaccines, the new Tdap vaccination for tetanus-prone wounds, the new polio vaccination, and the eligibility changes to the meningococcal C vaccine. Okay, so the current PCV10 4-dose schedule will be reduced to 3 doses for those who are under 5 as of the 1st of July 2020. So that will remove the 3-month PCV dose. Where applicable, any existing 3-month PCV10 dose tasks that are incomplete, so where the patient hasn't yet received them, these will be closed or removed. So if you see these slide on the screen here, if a 2017 immunisation schedule is newly added to a patient, then the PCV10 3-month task in the schedule will be automatically closed off with the status of closed not required and provider as auto-added. If a child less than 5 years old has the PCV10 3-month vaccine that is incomplete, then this vaccine task will be closed off with the status of closed not required and provider as auto-added. This will happen automatically during the upgrade. The closure will impact the 2017 childhood immunisation schedule, baby of Hep B mother schedule, and 2017 catch-up schedules. The existing TD adult 45-year and 65-year vaccines will no longer be available post the 1st of October 2020 and will be replaced by the Tdap 45-year and Tdap 65-year vaccines. In transitioning to that stage, the new vaccines will be available as alternatives to the existing TD adult 45-year and 65-year vaccines. The ADT vaccine, which is associated to the TD task, will be delisted by Pharmac and the Ministry of Health on the 1st of October 2020. So if you see the point right at the bottom of the screen, the fifth point, from the 1st of October, any claims for TD 45-year and TD 65-year vaccinations submitted to ProClaim will be rejected. But if the vaccine is submitted to NIR, this will be accepted and added to the patient's record. As well as this, there's a new Tdap tetanus-prone wound vaccine which will be created. This vaccine can be used for the recording of the treatment of tetanus-prone wounds for any age group. A new polio IPV vaccine will be created, which can be used to record entries for patients who have been given a separate polio vaccine. So that will be available via the single syringe from the Immunisation Schedule tab and the All Immunisations tab. Medtech will allow the polio IPV vaccination details captured for the patients to be sent to NIR and ProClaim. And the polio IPV vaccine details will be sent to NIR only if the patient or the patient's caregiver gives consent to opt on to NIR. Polio IPV vaccine records from update messages sent back from NIR status query check will be able to be updated in the patient's immunisation records, and the new polio vaccine will not have any valid alternatives, and similarly the polio IPV vaccine will not be a valid alternative to any other vaccines. Right, this slide's a little bit busy. So from the 1st of July, the meningococcal C vaccine can only be given to patients who are under 9 months, which means that the existing schedules that allow the vaccine to be given to patients up to 23 months will be amended or removed from that schedule. So there are no changes to the supply of the vaccine, meaning that the Nesivac C brand will continue to be listed on the pharmaceutical schedule. The access criteria will be amended to restrict the vaccine to children that are under 9 months old or who are too young to receive the meningococcal ACWY conjugate vaccine. Children under 9 months of age require 2 doses, 8 weeks apart, and a booster dose with the meningococcal ACWY vaccine 3 years after the primary series and then 5 yearly from there on. The existing meningococcal C vaccine eligible less than 12 months and the no claim less than 12 month schedules will be renamed to meningococcal C vaccine eligible less than 9 months and no claim less than 9 months. So they will have the following dose regimes: 2 doses 8 weeks apart, and the existing booster dose given at 12 months will be removed from the schedule. The meningococcal C vaccine eligible 12 months plus and the meningococcal C vaccine no claim 12 months plus schedules will be removed because they're no longer required, but the vaccines associated with these schedules will remain. Right, so now we will move into the ACC API integration changes. So I'm just going to switch to the PMS. Just bear with me for a moment. Okay. So first we will cover the setup of the ACC vendor ID. So this is mandatory in order to send the 45s, 18s and invoices directly to ACC. So you can use your ACC provider numbers as the vendor ID. These are found in 2 places: your staff member setup menu in the provider tab. So we'll just show you where that is. So find your staff member in the provider tab. So you'll see the vendor ID here, and that's copied from the provider number. And it's also found in the location settings. Sorry, I've just got someone that's unmuted themselves. Hang on a moment. Thank you. So we'll just open those location settings, find your location, and this is in the Codes and Defaults tab, the vendor ID field there. So when you upgrade, all the ACC provider numbers are copied and pasted into the ACC vendor ID field. If you create a new provider after you upgrade, you need to manually copy that provider number and pop it in the ACC vendor ID field there. So the vendor ID in the location settings is only applicable for practices that have previously enabled and used the ACC eSchedule. If this is your practice, you need to be aware that the script won't automatically copy the ACC provider numbers into the vendor ID fields, so you need to do that manually. It's very important, and I'll talk a little bit a bit more about this at the end of the webinar, but if your ACC vendor ID field in the location settings is blank, you need to leave it blank. And if for some reason you wanted to change that, give us a call first so we can talk you through that process and understand what you're trying to do. Okay, so to allow your practice to send forms and invoices to ACC through their online interface, you need to have a digital certificate configured in either the location or the staff setup. Both the digital certificate and passphrase are provided by HealthLink. If your practice has a single digital certificate for a specific location, this needs to be set up in the location settings, and you can do that here in the Codes and Defaults tab, and this little icon next to the ACC vendor ID field there is where you would add your digital certificate. And in the staff setup screen, the digital certificate is also under the provider tab and the same little icon next to the ACC vendor ID field there. So I'll now go over setting up the ACC contracts and services. So to provide an overview, there are two types of contracts. One is a regulatory generic contract, and the second is a non-regulatory contract or healthwise contract. In Staff Setup, under the Provider tab, so we'll go back into that screen here, you can find the ACC Provider Code field here. So this is the field we're looking at. Regulatory contracts are the generic prices that ACC will pay for services. So each regulatory contract has a contract number based on what your role is. So for example, the GP contract number is 80. However, the nurse, if you search in here, is 56 or 56A for a nurse practitioner, and so on and so forth. So you search for the role by clicking on this little ellipsis here. The regulatory contract numbers are derived based on the ACC provider code of the income provider who is invoicing for that service. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of this webinar. So you need to make sure the ACC provider code is the right code for that staff member based on what their provider type is. Non-regulatory contracts are legal contracts between ACC and an organisation who provides ACC services at a defined rate. So non-regulatory contracts are set up by clicking on this icon here. So this shows all the ACC services configured in the PMS and their contract numbers. So this field here is where you would enter the contract number. If your practice has non-regulatory contract numbers for their location, you need to make sure that you put this into the location settings. So we'll open that screen back up, and under the Codes and Defaults tab, this little icon next to the digital certificate icon is where you set up the contract numbers here. So if an individual staff member has their own non-regulatory contract number, you would put that in their staff setup. Otherwise, if it applies to the entire practice, you put it in your location setup. You need to be aware that if a service code doesn't exist in your PMS, it needs to be set up first with its subsidy rate before you enter the contract number beside the service. For more instructions on how you would do that, have a search of our knowledge base on our Insight Customer portal. Right, so now I'll talk a little bit about the automated ACC accounts. So as part of the upgrade, a new ACC account will be created automatically for each ACC vendor ID entered in the PMS. Because the staff member will have their own ACC vendor ID, the ACC account will be created for that specific staff member's ACC vendor ID, and it will automatically add under their staff setup. So back in that staff setup screen here, under accounts, and you'll see that they've got an ACC account set up there. These accounts will be grayed out automatically to avoid them from being removed. For practices that are enabled for ACC e-schedule, the ACC account will be created for the vendor ID in the location setup, and the ACC account will be associated with all staff members that are linked to that account. And just like you do at the moment, you can search for the ACC account in your F2 screen. So now we'll cover billing for quantity-based services. So ACC invoices require the submission of a billing method for all services invoiced. And there are 3 billing methods that ACC accept: distance, units, which is a flat fee, and time. So currently, services in Medtech32 can be set up as quantity-based, but the billing method can't be defined. To enable this, there's a new drop-down menu. So if we go into Setups, Accounting and Services here, open up a service. Here we go. If we tick quantity-based service, you can now choose distance, unit, or time. As part of the upgrade, existing services that are configured as quantity-based services will have the default selection for the billing method set. Right, so we'll move on to the ACC45. I'll just open up an ACC45 form. All right, so the existing ACC45 form has been updated to include the new functionality. In the main tab here, you can add up to 10 diagnoses, so it was previously 3. The time of the accident is now optional rather than mandatory. Under the Work and Referral tab here, the employment name and details are only required if the patient is an employee. For all other types of employment, it's optional. Shareholder, if I just tick this one here, shareholder has now been renamed to company owner or part owner. And ACC have requested the employer's country and postcode are included, but that's not yet mandatory. In the work capacity section here, there are extra tick boxes where you can specify how long the patient is unfit for work for, if it's ticked. So if we say they are unfit for, and you can select from here. You don't need to complete this if the employment type is company or part owner. You can give a maximum of 14 days off work or on alternative duties. You can also go into further details about what the physical restrictions are. So here you can tick what their restrictions are. That's if they're on alternative duties. And at the bottom here, the referral information section is unchanged. So as well as sending the ACC45, ACC also requires certain demographical information about the patient. The release notes on Insight have the full list of what information is required and whether or not it's mandatory, so make sure you check that. The ACC45 form is a one-time submission, so it needs to be accurate before submitting. As soon as it's submitted and the status is receipted, you can't edit it. If it's rejected, parked, or yet to be submitted, then you can still edit it. Before these changes, you could change a diagnosis after submitting an ACC45, but now you need to complete an ACC18 form if you want to change a diagnosis or use the change of diagnosis form. So the existing ACC45 electronic lodgement utility is used to submit ACC45s. The differences now are that the settings tab has been removed and other buttons that aren't required aren't there anymore. And this is where you select to send all completed forms or specific forms for lodgement. So now we will look at creating a new ACC18 form. So we'll just open that up. And just to clarify, the new ACC 18 form has been developed for medical certificates, but the previous ACC 18 form has been retained to submit historical ARC 18 forms manually. So first off, under the Injury Details tab, select the relevant ACC45 number. So you click on the ellipsis and choose which one this is about. Then it will auto-populate the corresponding information below as it was on the ACC45. If you want to add more diagnosis codes, you can use the Add button in the bottom left-hand corner here. And to delete a diagnosis, just select the Delete checkbox there. The most relevant diagnosis should be marked as the primary, and you would do that by selecting the Primary Diagnosis checkbox. The ACC 18 number is generated by ACC and is only displayed once the form is accepted, so it is normal that it looks grayed out here. So the Ability to Work tab allows you to enter the unfit for work and initial and subsequent restrictions. You can only enter subsequent restrictions after entering the initial time restrictions, and where possible you need to provide further details in the comments field. You can enter up to 3 time periods on one medical certificate, but you can't have any overlapping of dates at all. If you haven't completed that correctly, you'll get a warning message and it'll tell you what you need to rectify it. The Assistance Required tab is where you can specify what assistance the patient requires in order to get back to work. So if you choose yes here, then you need to select one of the 2 options below. So whether they need support to stay at work or return to work, and whether or not they need a clinical review of the patient's fitness in order to return. The rest of the tabs down here is optional. The patient provider declaration is where the provider must select the checkbox once discussing this with the patient and they give authorization. The date will default to the current today's date, and just like the ACC 45, certain patient demographics are required to submit this form, and the release notes have all of those details on, so you can access that on our Insight customer portal. If you're missing any mandatory information, you'll get a single warning prompt telling you what's missing. Once you submit that ACC 18 and it's accepted, you won't be able to edit it. If it's rejected or parked, you can edit it. And as soon as you click OK, that form is submitted instantly. If you want to change the diagnosis after that form is submitted, you need to use a new ACC 18 form or a change of diagnosis form. If the form is rejected for the reason will display in the claim status screen, but it will also display immediately on that provider's screen in real time. So now I'll go through the change of diagnosis form. So just like the previous forms, you need to click on the ellipsis and select the ACC45 number, and that will bring up the corresponding information. Again, you can delete, you can select which is a primary diagnosis, and you can add diagnoses from here. The change of diagnosis number is generated by ACC and only displayed once it's submitted and accepted. So again, that grey box at the top there is normal. So the difference being that the change of diagnosis form doesn't allow you to specify work capabilities or restrictions. If you're wanting to do that, then you need to use an ACC 18 form. And the patient provider tab, you need to tick this declaration checkbox again after discussing it with the patient, and the date will automatically populate to today's date. So prior to these changes, the ACC contract number wasn't looked at. So there wasn't a lot of emphasis on the income provider in the F9 invoice screen. With these changes, ACC now checks that the income provider and their associated contract number matches the service that you're invoicing for. So that's either a big change for a practice or no change at all, depending on how you do your invoicing. So for example, if my income provider is set to the GP and I try to invoice for a nurse consult, this claim will be rejected. That's why it's crucial that you verify your staff member setup to check that their contract number and the ACC provider type is correct, and ensure that their income isn't pointing to someone who has a different contract number. In your invoice screen here, you can add a purchase order number by clicking the Annotate Invoice button here, and you can type that straight in there. You can view claims for each provider by looking at the account holder account screen for that ACC account. So if we open an ACC account here, and you open up your patient manager, it will be listed in the account holder account screen there. So quite a few practices have upgraded, and we've had a few scenarios which have come through our help desk, which I just wanted to quickly talk to. So practices by default will have a setting, either practice or provider grouping in the staff setup. So, sorry, in the location setup. So if I bring that screen up here. So their claims format will either be provider grouping or practice grouping. So it's really important that you stick to what your location setting is defaulted at. And if you want to change it, then perhaps contact us first so we can talk you through the implications of that or make sure that you know exactly what needs to be done. We've also had some practices that have changed and then reverted back. And this does change quite a few things in the PMS. So again, if you're going to change it either way, please contact us first to make sure that we can talk you through that process. We've also had a number of calls through our help desk because ACC45s aren't being accepted once the provider or the person generating the form clicks OK. So in that case, it's something that we just need to retrain ourselves to look at, but the error message will tell you exactly what's missing, and often it will be something minor like there is no postcode for the patient in the F3 screen. So if you just have a look at what the error message is, rectify that information, and then try and submit it again, then it should go through no problems. And of course, if there's an issue, you can call us, but it's quite important to check what that error message is saying in the first place. So what I might do now is have a look at some of the questions because there are a few that have come through. So if you just pause for a moment, I will just unmute our presenters. So Annette and Harriet and Prashant, you should be able to talk now. Can we just test? Is everyone there?
Yep, I'm here.
Fabulous. Thank you. Annette and Harriet, can you hear us all right?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello. Thank you for joining. Fabulous. So what I might do is just start the Q&A session. I'll direct the questions as I read them. There aren't a lot of questions. So we have had a question. So we have got, well, we have a question about the nominated provider income. So this has definitely been an issue for some practices, and it depends on how you do your invoicing and what happens after you upgrade. So for those practices, we ask that you contact our help desk. We do have a quick reference guide to help show you through the different options available to you. But it does depend, it's case by case scenario for practices because everybody invoices a bit differently. So there isn't a generic answer to that one. The next question is, what if it says fail? So I'm assuming that is when trying to submit an ACC45. So Prashant, do you just want to talk through what actions to take if the ACC45 doesn't go through?
Yep. So currently, like the ACC45, still like you need to submit it through the utilities, like the current ACC unload utility. That's what you'll be using. Once you submit it, like there's a new screen called claim status screen under module. Do you have access to?
Yes, I can show you. Yep. So module.
Accidents claim status. Okay, so I guess you don't have any ACC45 over there, but I mean that's where like the bottommost screen like is where like we show all the error messages like for that particular ACC45.
Sure.
So it'll tell you exactly what has failed. Like, so it's like a two-prone checks. Like before you submit like all the mandatory data which is required for ACC45, we prompt you if any of them are missing upfront. And after you rectify all those things and then you submit, and there are still due to some reason it's getting rejected by ACC, it'll tell you exactly what is the reason. So you can like straight away check over there and it'll tell you like what to fix, and you can fix that and submit it. And you can call us,
Fabulous.
like if say like it doesn't go through, then you can call us, like if you've tried the reasons what is given there and you've tried submitting, and even after that you're getting an error, yep, call us. But it'll like most of the it's quite straightforward where you can fix it yourselves actually.
Thank you. Okay. The next question is for you as well, Prashanth. Can GPs still submit ACC 18s via BPAC?
Yep. So we haven't taken out BPAC, like it's still available. The main thing is like the BPAC still goes out in the old e-gateway thing, like the ACC gateway. And what we are using, our forms are directly integrated with their APIs. That's the only difference. But both of them are available, and it's up to you what form you would like to use. Like
Sure.
so if you would
Okay.
like to use our form, use that. Otherwise, you can still use BPAC forms.
Okay, cool. And now another question is, in location settings, our default providers for service and income are different. Should they be the same?
No, we don't look at the location. The location default providers are only for reporting purposes, and especially the main person who's supposed to be displayed on the account holder account screen, like the main screen. But apart from that, like we don't use that data to submit anything to ACC. Like we only send the details from the income provider of the invoice screen, not from the default location setting screen actually.
Okay. And can we just give a comment on, we are a mixed clinic of GP practice and urgent care, so we work under 2 contracts.
So in this case, like you'll most probably will have a non-regulatory contract for your urgent care services. So as Holly had described earlier, like you need to go to the location settings and under the non-regulatory contract setup, put all your urgent care non-regulatory contract numbers against those services, and also ensure under the ACC provider type under staff settings, like your GP 80 and like the nurse 56, that is also allocated correctly, configured properly. And then
Okay.
like if it is a not like urgent care service, like we'll pick up your non-regulatory contract automatically and we'll submit that to ACC. And if it's a GP service that you're using, we'll know that like, okay, this is not an urgent care, it's a GP, and we'll submit your GP based regulatory contract details to ACC.
Great, thank you. And so I'm not sure, Annette or Harriet, who wants to comment on this one. Can we just get a little um, update, I suppose, from you about why things have changed, why these changes have come about from ACC?
Harriet here. I honestly wouldn't be able to answer that question. It's something that we'd probably have to look at answering offline or getting the
Sure.
information. Yeah.
Yep, that's fine. And for anyone that has asked a question that we aren't answering, we will definitely get back to you after the session. And I'll just make sure that we're not missing anything. So Prashanth, this is probably one for you. Some staff have the vendor ID entered in the staff setup and some do not. Should it be entered for all staff and digital certificate applied?
So if a staff has a ACC provider number, then automatically the same number will be copied across into the vendor ID field within the staff setup. So that is the default currently what we are doing. Like currently nobody has a location level vendor ID. It's all applied under the staff level based upon the existing ACC provider number. So in this case, like if you have seen a staff who doesn't have a ACC vendor ID, it'll be most probably because like they didn't have a ACC provider number to start with, because like we use that number to copy across. So in this case, like that staff would not have had a ACC provider number. So that's the only reason why this would have happened. And if you believe that that staff should have had a ACC provider number, then you need to contact ACC and get hold of that number and enter it within the staff setup, and also copy the same number across to the ACC vendor ID field within the staff
Okay,
setup.
great, thank you. We've had someone say that the status says completed. I think they're talking about under the claim status. Says it's completed, failed, and receipted. Why would it say failed when it's a new claim?
It will only state failed when it's actually failed when submitting it to ACC. So it's quite instant, like we'll know immediately whether ACC has accepted it or rejected it. So if it is rejected, it'll come as failed, and if it is accepted, it'll come as received. So,
And so that person on generating it will get that error message telling them what information was missing?
yeah, it'll tell you like exactly what is missing there if it is failed. And like, and like go to the claim status screen, like it'll tell you exactly why it has failed, and you can rectify that.
Fabulous, thank you. Okay, just checking there's nothing else. I've answered these ones. So there are a couple of questions that are very specific to the practices that I haven't answered. We will contact you after the session in the next day or two to go through your questions. Annette or Harriet, is there anything else you wanted to add to the session today?
Can you hear me there now?
Yes.
Hello. Sorry, hardware issue. I can go back to the question you were inquiring about as to why these changes have occurred, if you would like an explanation.
Yes, that would be great. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Annette.
So the real history of that is that the e-business gateway uses an old form of technology called Java. And Java is very much a dying technology, and at some point it will completely die. So we had to create another way for people to submit information to ACC. And so we made API platforms available, and Medtech have created this new system to be able to work directly with our API. So it avoids using Java so that you wouldn't all be left stranded at some point with Java suddenly dying and there being no alternative. So this is really future-proofing to make sure that everything can continue to work smoothly.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. We have had a couple of more questions roll in as well, so I'll just go through that. Will we no longer have to upload claims through utilities ACC45 electronic? That would be for you, Prashant.
So you still have to submit the ACC45s through the same utility that you were using previously. It's not like an instant thing where once you submit, click OK on the ACC45 form, it'll go. It's not like that. It's still, you need to go to the utilities and use the batch mode, like, the unload utility has to be used. And only then it will be submitted to ACC. You just select the ones you want to submit and then send it off. And same with the invoices, but with invoices, like it doesn't, the unload utility is not under the utilities section, it's under the tools message transfer section. That's the only change that has occurred with invoicing. So like,
sorry, I can show you that.
Transfer electronic e-schedule claims, that's the new place where you need to submit your invoices from. And your ACC45s, you can still use the existing utilities module for that. And yep, and then once you submit it, it'll straight away go to ACC, and immediately you can go to your claim status window and check what has happened over there, like, what's the status. And I would like to point out like a few messages, like few errors, like common errors that we got because, like, where the practice try to submit something through the utility, the ACC45 unload utility, and they click OK, and within, like, it's processing, it's getting, the data is getting submitted to ACC, and like within, like, say 2 or 3 seconds, or within 5 seconds, you click OK once more. What will happen is, like, the initial data that you have submitted to ACC will be accepted by them, and now you click OK one more time, like the same data will be sent off to ACC again. And in this time, like you'll get an error saying that like the number is already available in ACC's database, because the first time when you clicked, it's already gone through. So you need to have patience. Like you don't have to like go and click. Like we'll tell you like exactly what's the process, because there's a message which will come up once the whole process has ended, saying like how many claims have gone through, how many have been rejected and all. So you need to wait for that to come through before you click anything, like so don't click OK buttons multiple times to
Okay,
avoid this duplicate errors coming through.
thank you. I think that's all of our questions for today. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Annette or Harriet?
It's Rachel. Sorry.
Oh, hi,
I was just
Rachel.
going to, hi, sorry, we're having to share a headset, so it hasn't
Yeah.
been an ideal situation, but that's okay.
No problem.
I was just going to mention the most common message that we're getting from Medtech customers is when they get the "you are not authorised to access the vendor record." All it means is the provider ID, the vendor ID that they're using isn't vendor linked to the digital certificate holder for the practice. All your customers need to do is send us just literally a quick email and saying, we're from Millstone Family Practice, as it were, and we find that our provider, John Smith, vendor ID AB12345 isn't linked to Paul Jones's digital certificate, and we will process that for him. It literally takes about 30 seconds. So if ever that error message comes up, we can fix that for them almost instantly.
Fabulous. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and if they're at all wary, they can send us a list of all the IDs that they think should be linked to that digital certificate, and we're happy to go through those and ensure that their list matches our list.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Rachel, there was another use case like where the bank account number is different for that particular provider, and because of that, like you get another message. So
Yep,
for that,
so
like you.
Yep. So it could be where it says vendor ID is you don't have access to this. It could be that the bank account is linked to maybe their previous practice, and all we then need to do is between us and the registration team that Harriet's in, we might get the vendor to fill in a form, and yeah, it can be very easily fixed. We just need to know that there's an issue with a particular vendor ID, and one way or another we'll sort it out for them.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Prashant, I do have a couple of questions that have just come through for you. Oh, sorry, Rachel, this one's for you. What's the email that they should send? The email address,
yes.
I'm assuming.
ebusinessinfo
Fabulous.
at
ACC.
acc.co.nz.
Fabulous, thank you. Prashant, we have a question. Are there any changes to submitting information requests to ACC?
When you say submission information requests, like what exactly does it mean? You get that?
That's all that they've listed, but we can contact that person. That's fine. How would I find my patients' names when I'm consolidating my invoices from ACC?
It will be under account holder account screen, like all the patient details, all the invoicing will be grouped under that ACC account.
Great. Okay. So when you have a locum working at the practice, do they need to be linked to the practice certificate each time?
Yep. They need to speak to registrations. There's a locum update form that needs to be filled in. The locum IDs are only valid for 3 months at a time. So the practice fills in that form, lets the registration team know how long the locum will be at that practice.
Okay.
And then the registration team let us know, and we ensure that that vendor link is up and running.
Fabulous,
No,
thank you.
Sorry, it's Harriet here. So that locum number will always be linked to the digital certificate. It's just whether the locum number is active or not is what determines it. Yeah.
Great. That is the end of our questions. We've reached the end. So thank you very much, Rachel, Annette, and Harriet for joining. If anybody has a question that we haven't answered today, we will get back to you. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to us if you think of things afterwards, or to ACC. And a copy of this webinar will be put up on our Insight Customer portal by early next week, I should say. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending the session today, and to our panelists. And
Thanks for having us.
we will
Thank
reach out to
you.
those practices. Thanks, guys.
Okay,
See you later.
bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.